Welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. Our mission today, well, it's to demystify the shadowy and honestly kind of terrifying world of ethical hacking.
Yeah, we are pulling from a really comprehensive cybersecurity masterclass to break all this down,
Uh,
and it is quite the rabbit hole.
it really is. So, to kick things off, for everyone listening, I want you to imagine sitting at your desk on just a random Tuesday.
Okay, painting a picture.
Right. You go to open a file, and instead of your normal financial projections, a jarring red screen pops up. It says your data is locked, it's encrypted, and you have exactly 24 hours to pay $300 in Bitcoin.
Or the entire database is gone forever.
Exactly. Now that sounds like a Hollywood thriller, right?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But for hundreds of thousands of organizations, I mean, that was their literal reality back in May of 2017 with the WannaCry ransomware attack.
Oh, WannaCry. That was massive.
The sheer velocity of that worm was staggering. It wasn't just hitting, isolated laptops. It was actively exploiting a vulnerability in the server message block protocol, SMBV1, for the technical folks to just aggressively propagate laterally across entire internal networks.
And the numbers are wild. The source material notes that over 230,000 computers across 150 countries were infected in a single day.
In one day.
Massive operations just ground to an absolute halt. I mean, FedEx, Nissan, Britain's National Health Service, entire global supply chains paralyzed because of this single exploit called Eternal Blue.
Which, ironically, was originally developed by the NSA before it got leaked.
Right, right. So the fallout from that was a massive wake-up call. When you look at the economics, the global financial toll of cybercrime hit an estimated $6 trillion by 2021.
$6 trillion. That's a hard number to even wrap your head around.
It really is.
And in a threat landscape scaling that aggressively, the traditional defensive strategy of just, building taller digital walls, stacking firewalls, and endpoint antivirus, it's fundamentally broken.
It's just not enough anymore.
No, it's not. The reality is that an organization's perimeter is porous. So the only viable way to defend a network today is to adopt an offensive mindset. You have to think exactly like the attacker.
Which brings us to our first big takeaway. Let's unpack the who and the why behind these attacks, because the threat actors are hardly a monolith, right?
Not at all.
The industry categorizes the spectrum of attackers using this HAT terminology. So on one end, you have the black hats. These are the traditional financially or maliciously motivated cyber criminals.
The bad guys.
Right, the bad guys. They are the ones deploying ransomware, stealing proprietary data, and operating on the dark web to monetize stolen credentials.
But then on the total opposite end of that spectrum, you have the white hats, the ethical hackers.
Good guys.
Exactly. These are offensive security professionals hired specifically to dismantle a company's defenses before the black hats get a chance to do it.
The master class gives this really great example. Take the case of a business owner. Let's just call him Dan. So Dan ran a highly successful online trading platform.
Okay.
And a black hat breached his servers, completely bypassed his perimeter firewalls, and just quietly siphoned off customer credentials.
Ouch.
Yeah. And when Dan refused to pay the ransom, the attacker dumped the data. Dan lost millions. But more importantly, the reputational damage nearly bankrupted the entire firm.
Because the trust was gone.
Exactly. Dan's fatal flaw was assuming his automated defenses were enough. So to fix it, he ended up hiring a white hat named John to completely audit his rebuilt infrastructure.
And John's mandate was to launch a full-scale simulated attack using the exact same exploits a real threat actor would use.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this with a lockpicker analogy. A white hat is basically a professional lockpicker you hire to test your home security before a real burglar shows up.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
But what about the gray hats? Because the source mentions them too. I have to push back a little here. Are gray hats essentially acting as the internet's chaotic neutral vigilantes?
That's one way to phrase it.
Because from a security standpoint, isn't it incredibly dangerous to have unauthorized people testing your locks without asking? Even if they claim they have good intentions, it's still trespassing.
What's fascinating here is that you're hitting on the core legal friction of the entire cybersecurity field.
Okay, how so?
Well, while a gray hat might argue they are performing a public service, exposing a zero-day vulnerability before a cartel exploits it, unauthorized access, is a federal crime under statutes like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Full stop.
So good intentions don't matter.
Right. Intent does not negate the illegality of the breach. This is exactly why legitimate white hat hacking relies entirely on a meticulously drafted statement of work, or SOW.
You need a contract.
A very specific one. You need strict rules of engagement. A legal contract has to define the exact IP ranges and scope, the specific hours testing can occur, and which critical systems are just strictly off limits to prevent accidental downtime.
Yeah, you definitely want that legal framework before someone starts dropping active payloads on your production servers.
Exactly.
And the ecosystem is even broader than just those three hats, right? We also see script kiddies.
Oh, yeah. The novices.
Right, unskilled actors who don't actually understand the underlying code, but they leverage prepackaged frameworks like Metasploit to launch sophisticated attacks anyway.
Yeah, they just point and click.
And then on the other extreme, you have state-sponsored actors or advanced persistent threats APTs.
Which is a whole different ballgame.
Massive government budgets. They conduct cyber espionage or disrupt critical infrastructure, like that Stuxnet attack on the Iranian centrifuges.
Right, highly targeted.
And finally, hacktivists. These are folks who compromise targets to broadcast a political or social message, fully wanting the public to know who breached the system.
So it's a highly diversified threat landscape. But it begs the question, if a white hat's legal boundaries are strictly defined by their contract, how do they actually simulate a chaotic, rule-breaking criminal without violating those terms?
They need a system.
Exactly. It requires moving away from just random attacks and following a highly rigid six-phase methodology.
Okay, let's walk through those phases. Phase one is reconnaissance.
Right.
And this isn't just pinging a server. This is deep open source intelligence, or OSINT, gathering. Before even touching the target network, an ethical hacker maps out the entire digital footprint.
They are looking at domain registrations, scraping employee emails for phishing lists, things like that.
Yeah, and using search engines like Shodan to find misconfigured internet-facing devices. They basically want to find that forgotten, unpatched staging server that IT spun up 3 years ago and just abandoned.
Which happens all the time. So once that footprint is mapped, phase two is scanning. This is where the hacker actively interacts with the target's infrastructure. They use tools like Nmap, but they aren't just looking for open doors, they are mapping the network topology.
Right.
A sophisticated attacker will use stealth techniques, like a TCP/SYN scan. They send a synchronization request to a port, and if the port replies, the attacker immediately drops the connection before a full handshake is completed.
Because completing the handshake would log the interaction on the target server, right?
Exactly.
So by dropping it early, they map the open ports without triggering basic perimeter alarms.
Precisely. And once they identify open ports and services, they map those against known vulnerabilities using an automated vulnerability scanner like Nessus.
Okay.
Nessus basically compares the software versions running on those open ports against the CVE database, the common vulnerabilities and exposures list, to highlight exact weaknesses.
Which perfectly sets up phase three, gaining access.
The fun part.
Right. So the reconnaissance and scanning have highlighted a vulnerability, let's say an unpatched Apache server. Now they weaponize it.
Right. They might use a penetration testing framework to deliver a specific payload.
Like, if the server is vulnerable to a buffer overflow, the hacker sends a crafted packet that overwhelms the application's memory, forcing it to execute an attached reverse shell.
And boom, suddenly the hacker's machine has a command line interface directly into the target server.
But getting in is only half the battle, isn't it?
It really is. Phase 4 is maintaining access. A reverse shell is actually pretty fragile. If a system administrator reboots the server or even just patches the software, the connection drops.
So the hacker gets kicked out.
Right. So the ethical hacker needs persistence. They will modify registry keys, schedule hidden tasks, or deploy rootkits to ensure that even after a system restart, a backdoor quietly opens back up, giving them continuous remote access.
Now wait, here is where the methodology gets incredibly counterintuitive to me. Phase 5 is clearing tracks. The ethical hacker actively modifies system logs, deletes their command history, and attempts to erase any forensic evidence that they were ever inside the network. I have to push back here. Why would a consultant who was explicitly hired by the chief information security officer to be there spend hours trying to cover their tracks?
It sounds backwards, I know. This is perhaps the most misunderstood phase, but it represents the true value of an advanced penetration test.
Okay, explain that.
Well, an enterprise network doesn't just rely on passive firewalls. They have a Security Operations Center, a SOC. They have active endpoint detection and response tools, and SIM security information and event management systems ingesting gigabytes of log data every single second.
Right, the blue team.
Exactly. They have a blue team of security analysts actively hunting for anomalies.
So if the white hat just loudly stomps around the network using default tools and doesn't try to hide, they're really only testing the initial perimeter defenses.
Right. By aggressively attempting to delete logs, obfuscate their malware, and blend their traffic with normal network noise, the White Hat is performing a full live-fire stress test of the organization's detection and response capabilities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are testing whether the blue team can spot a stealthy, sophisticated adversary who is actively trying to blind the security cameras, so to speak.
That makes total sense.
If the hacker successfully roots the domain controller, deletes all the evidence, and the blue team never even raises an alert, the organization learns that their internal detection mechanisms are completely ineffective.
It's a terrifying but totally necessary drill, and it all culminates in Phase 6, reporting.
The most important part for the client.
Right. The white hat doesn't just say, hey, I got in. They deliver a comprehensive technical breakdown. A risk matrix detailing every CVE exploited, the exact command syntax used, how they bypass the EDR, and most importantly, the actionable remediation steps the IT team needs to take to close those gaps.
The technical sophistication of these attacks is staggering, really. But it relies on an assumption that the underlying software actually has a flaw. The complication is that modern encryption standards are mathematically incredibly robust.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This leads us to the human vulnerability. Social engineering.
Oh, yes.
I always think of it like this: social engineering is the digital equivalent of a con artist putting on a high-vis vest, grabbing a clipboard, and just confidently talking their way past the security desk.
It works surprisingly well in real life, too.
Right. Why spend weeks trying to break AES 256 encryption or find a zero-day exploit when you can just trick the human being who already holds the decryption keys?
It is almost always the path of least resistance. Social engineering is just the tactical manipulation of human psychology. I mean, we spend millions configuring zero-trust architectures, but machines operate strictly on logic.
You can't sweet-talk a router.
Exactly. You cannot persuade a firewall to make an exception because you're having a bad day. Humans, however, are driven by empathy, greed, curiosity, and a genuine desire to be helpful. Threat actors weaponize those exact traits.
Greed is a classic vector. It's easy for us to dismiss the obvious Nigerian prince emails or fake lottery scams as relics of the early internet.
Right, we assume everyone knows better now.
Exactly. But at scale, social engineering is a numbers game. If an attacker sends out 100,000 highly sophisticated spear phishing emails spoofing, say, a corporate bonus structure,
They only need one person to click.
just one exhausted employee in the accounting department to let their greed override their skepticism and click the malicious link.
And curiosity is equally dangerous. Consider the physical penetration testing tactic of the USB drop.
Oh, this one is wild.
An attacker doesn't need to break through the building's physical security. They just scatter a dozen branded USB thumb drives in the employee parking lot or the local coffee shop.
You just leave them on a table.
Yeah. Human nature dictates that someone will pick one up and plug it into their corporate workstation just to see who it belongs to.
And the moment they plug it in, the network is compromised. I know from the masterclass that some of these drives aren't even standard storage devices. They act as human interface devices, or HIDs.
Yep.
The computer basically registers the USB as a keyboard, and the drive instantly starts injecting thousands of keystrokes a second to execute a payload, completely bypassing any policies that disable external storage.
The ingenuity is really alarming. And then, well, we look at the familiarity exploit. Think about how many critical services, banking, email, corporate portals, still rely on security questions for password resets.
Like, what was your first car?
Right. Or, what is your mother's maiden name? An attacker doesn't need to breach a database to find those answers. They just perform basic OSINT on your public social media profiles.
People willingly broadcast those answers on Facebook and LinkedIn every single day.
Exactly. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, when you look at how easily human psychology can be hacked, it completely reframes how we view corporate IT policies.
It really does. Mandatory multi-factor authentication, complex passphrase requirements, and those seemingly endless anti-phishing training modules.
Everyone hates them.
They do. But they aren't just bureaucratic friction created by the IT department to annoy everyone. They are critical defensive layers.
Absolutely, because the strongest cryptography in the world is instantly nullified if an employee willingly hands over their credentials to an attacker spoofing a help desk phone call.
Humans remain the ultimate vulnerability that cannot be permanently patched. And this is a big, but what happens when the human doesn't make a mistake?
What do you think?
What happens when the credentials are secure, the employees are fully trained, and the target is actually hardened? That is when attackers pivot from psychological manipulation to raw, distributed computational power.
Right. Let's talk about cryptanalysis and brute forcing. When data is properly encrypted, an attacker who steals that database is just left with scrambled, unreadable ciphertext.
Gibberish.
Complete gibberish. To break it, the most primitive method is the brute force attack, where a script systematically cycles through every possible alphanumeric combination until it hits the correct key.
Mathematically, that works 100% of the time.
It does, but practically, against a sufficiently long and complex passphrase, it could take modern processors centuries to find the match.
Because brute force is computationally so expensive and slow, attackers develop shortcuts.
Yeah.
Like the dictionary attack.
Yeah.
Instead of guessing random character combinations, the script runs through massive compiled databases of known words, common phrases, and previously breached passwords.
So if your password is a common word followed by a year, a dictionary attack will crack it in milliseconds.
But the most fascinating technique to me from the source material is the use of rainbow tables.
Oh, those are clever.
If an attacker steals a database of hashed passwords, because obviously no secure system stores passwords in plain text, they don't want to spend time hashing every single guess to see if it matches the stolen hash.
Right, that takes too long.
So a rainbow table is just this massive pre-computed database of plain text passwords and their corresponding hash values. They just compare the stolen hash against the rainbow table to instantly look up the plain text password.
Which is exactly why modern systems employ salting.
Salting.
Yeah, salting. When you create a password, the system appends a long string of random data, the salt, to your password before it hashes it.
Oh, I see.
So even if two users have the exact same password, their hashes will look completely different because of the unique salts. This simple mechanism completely invalidates rainbow tables.
Because the attacker would have to pre-compute a massive table for every single possible salt, which requires just an impossible amount of storage.
Exactly. It's an incredible arms race. But, the application of raw computing power isn't just used for cracking passwords, it's used for sheer destruction. The transition from a denial of service, or DOS attack, to a distributed denial of service, or DDoS attack, is a terrifying leap in scale.
Because a standard DOS attack just involves a single machine trying to overwhelm a target server with traffic, which is easily blocked.
Very easy. But a DDoS attack relies on a massive botnet, a network of compromised devices, often referred to as a zombie army.
A zombie army?
Yeah. The attacker, or bot herder, controls this infrastructure centrally. When triggered, thousands or millions of devices simultaneously flood a single target IP with requests.
The 2018 attack on GitHub is a perfect case study of this, but it wasn't just a massive botnet. They used a memcached amplification attack.
Right, amplification is key here.
The attackers spoofed GitHub's IP address and sent small requests to thousands of vulnerable memcached servers across the internet. And because of the vulnerability, those servers responded with packets 50,000 times larger than the request.
50,000 times larger.
All of that amplified traffic peaking at 1.35 terabits per second was directed straight at GitHub, overwhelming their infrastructure instantly.
Amplification is devastating, but the sheer volume of available devices is the core issue today. And the primary fuel for modern botnets is the Internet of Things, or IoT.
This is a massive global vulnerability surface. We are talking about internet-connected security cameras, smart thermostats, routers, and even home appliances. And these devices often ship with hard-coded default credentials like admin and password baked right into their firmware, which the average consumer never changes.
And sometimes they literally cannot change them. The Mirai botnet is the textbook example of this.
Tell me about that one.
So the creators wrote a relatively simple script that autonomously scanned the internet for open telnet ports on IoT devices. When it found one, it tried a list of just 61 default passwords.
Just 61.
That's it. If successful, it infected the device, turning it into a node in the botnet, and immediately commanded it to start scanning for more vulnerable devices. The growth was exponential.
So what this means for you, the listener, is that your smart TV could be silently participating in a highly coordinated, high-bandwidth cyber attack against a major financial institution.
Yep.
And the only symptom you might notice is that your Netflix stream is buffering a little more than usual.
The aggregate bandwidth of millions of compromised consumer devices provides threat actors with the power to take down critical infrastructure on a national level. It's Wild West out there.
It really is. So based on the sheer scale of the threats we've analyzed today, from the sophisticated OSINT reconnaissance of a targeted attack to the automated, indiscriminate infection of an IoT botnet, the defensive strategy requires vigilance at every single level.
Absolutely.
The baseline takeaway from the masterclass is adopting complex, randomly generated passphrases managed by a dedicated password manager to defeat dictionary attacks. You need hardware-based multi-factor authentication to render stolen credentials useless.
And at the network level, utilizing modern VPN protocols like WireGuard or IPsec ensures that your traffic is encrypted end-to-end. That protects against interception on untrusted networks.
Crucial.
Yeah, and endport detection and response tools, coupled with properly configured stateful firewalls, those are simply non-negotiable for monitoring anomalous traffic.
And above all, it requires cultivating a culture of active skepticism, verifying the source of an unexpected email, refusing to provide sensitive data over unverified channels, and never plugging an unknown physical device into your hardware.
The cybersecurity landscape is an asymmetrical, continuous game of cat and mouse. Every time a new defensive protocol is standardized, adversarial researchers are already reverse engineering it to find the bypass.
They never stop.
No, they don't. Staying informed on the mechanics of these threats is the most critical defensive layer you possess.
It is a relentless, fascinating battlefield. Which brings me to a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. We've detailed how easily our rush to connect every physical object to the internet has created massive vulnerabilities, like the Mirai botnet.
Right.
If the number of connected smart devices in our homes and cities continues to grow exponentially, and many remain unpatched and vulnerable by design, well, at what point does our collective demand for frictionless personal convenience become the exact infrastructure that enables catastrophic global cyber warfare?
That is a heavy question.
Think about the strategic implications of that next time you ask your smart fridge for the weather.